Collaboration and cooperation is important in producing a meeting, but if you think that's important, can you imagine how important it is in conquering Mount Everest? We're joined today at PSAV Inspiration Cafe by Jaime Clarke.
Hey, Bill.
And Jaime, I wish I had a title for you, but I'm going to go through some accomplishments. I have to go to my notes.
Yeah,
There's so many, I have to read this. So, in 1997, you were the 9th Canadian to summit Mt Everest.
Yes, sir.
True? That was your third climb?
Yes.
You're also a 3-time Canadian junior cross-country ski champion. You've co-produced 2 documentary films and a book called Above All Else.
Yes.
And another book, Everest to Arabia.
Yes.
And the books and the documentaries have been on National Geographic.
Yes. And
you're the co-founder of a successful outdoor equipment and apparel company. Is that true?
I don't know how successful we are, but yeah, we have a store.
So I couldn't say, Jaime Clarke, all these things. So you're a skier, an athlete, a climber, a filmmaker, an author, a documentary producer, a business owner. All true.
I guess, and a dad and a husband too.
And in a list of all that.
Those are probably the best titles.
Maybe
I've got
I got them in the wrong order.
Yeah.
But the question I have, just to start off, is with all that success, what have you learned about failure?
Oh, well, a boatload. In fact, probably what for me. You list, and that's kind of interesting and nice to hear all those things, but behind every one of those points, there's probably 20 that we could add to it in the failure column. And I guess I've learned that failure is, it's the ingredients of success.
You have to go through it.
You can't make success without a big bag of failure.
And for those who are charged with planning and organizing a meeting where you bring together a team of people that you may not have worked with before.
Right.
That very much parallels what you go through in a climb, does it not?
It does in some ways. I mean, on a big expedition, your core climbing team, you want to have experience with them. I don't want to arrive in that event with a group of strangers. So in the high stress levels, you have training climbs. So you put on a smaller event, you do something that can test the relationship a little bit before you're on the big mountain itself.
So when you actually I did not know that. When you make the big climb, you've actually worked with at least some of the core team before.
That's the way I like to organize and be part of expeditions. That's not always the case today. There's commercial expeditions where you can buy your way on, and that may work in its own way. Not for me. I want to know who we're climbing with. I want to know your skeletons. I want you to know mine, as awkward as that might be. But if we're going to go up there and put our lives at risk, we should have a pretty good sense of who everyone is.
But and putting a meeting at risk is nothing like putting your lives at risk. But on the other hand, you still want to know the skeletons in the closet.
I tell you, being at conferences is a lot more nerve-wracking and standing on a stage and getting the event right, I think, than climbing a mountain. I'm often more fearful in that environment in a conference center than I am, hanging off of some cliff. So I think we all have our own fears and anxieties, and we all have what's important to us, and we want to be professional. We want to get it right. And when a meeting goes well, it's magic, and when it goes bad, oh man, it's hell.
It's a nightmare.
Oh.
I was fortunate to see you speak once, and you talked about a decision that somebody had to make about whether they go the last bit, knowing the weather was closing in.
Right.
And the hard decision of turning back, I believe is what you were talking about. And
yeah, getting close to the summit. Well, sometimes you get seduced, by the success. It's right there. In mountaineering, we call it the summit fever. You get just obsessed, and the problem with that obsession is that it can compromise your judgment, your decision making. And ultimately, it's not worth dying for, losing your fingers and toes for. But you get so wrapped up in it, you lose perspective. And there's no shortcut to learning when to quit, because sometimes that's the right thing to do. But through life's experiences, that's the wisdom that life gives you. That's the value of failure. You get your butt kicked and you learn a little bit more. You make a better decision next time.
And I think in this industry, it's not unlike yours in that do climbers talk to other climbers? Certain expeditions talk to other? Do you share information?
Absolutely. And some people are pretty cheap with it, but but some people are very, and I think that's, to be free and generous with your experience. And I know that I see that certainly meeting planners are swapping information about that location or that production crew or that AV group or the speaker or that caterer. Or that property. Yeah, I think that's what's great about having the association is everyone has amazing experiences that we can share and you can learn from each other. And climbers do it too. We read about other expeditions, we watch documentary films, you build friendships, you get the beta, you get the information, you share it. I think in order for that to happen in your life, you first have to give it. I have a very limited amount of knowledge about a very few and weird things. If you're interested, I'll give you all I got. And if you put that out in the world, then it generally is coming back to you.
It's interesting, this notion of sharing and collaboration, because I think that's to some degree empowered by social media. But the downside of social media is that we believe we're connecting and we aren't. We're literally connecting, but not emotionally connecting. What's that mean to you as a speaker with all this change in social media?
Well, I'm a terrible tweeter, Facebooker. I just think nobody cares what I'm up to, but so I don't want to annoy people with my, hey, guess what I did today?
Right.
But there is value in it, because I think if you have something of interest there, you'd be surprised that people might actually care to hear about it. And I think what the effort that I encourage people and employ, hopefully myself, is to use those modes of communication as a way to extend communication rather than a way to kind of keep you distant or become aloof. When you think you're building a relationship through the social media, not really building a relationship per se, you're building a foundation for information exchange.
Right.
But it doesn't replace you and me sitting here in our space, talking, looking in your eyes. And you can't, I mean, humans, we need that.
So would you say that social media is a substitute for, a supplement to...
Supplement, not a substitute,
but
a
substitute for a live event.
An aid,
right.
Yeah. It's a way to help, enhance. I mean, for Mt Everest, we used to go there in the early 90s, and you could go and not talk to anybody for months. In a way, it was beautiful, because you'd be like, okay, Mom, see you later, I'll be back in a couple of months. Okay, son. And off you go. And now it's like, oh, I gotta call my mom. Or, now I had a sat phone. I was on Everest last year. I'm calling my wife and my kids, hey, how's everybody doing? And they're like, Dad, get off the mountain, just come home, goodbye. And I'm up at 26,000 feet sitting in a tent. They didn't want to be bothered with a phone call. So it's changed it. It changes in great ways. It changes in terrible ways, but at the same time, it's progress.
And you can't move backwards. So
no, embrace it. Go for it.
But I think of all the people we speak to in this business, you're the one who actually is the only one looking out that way, while the whole audience is looking up this way. So
which is nerve-wracking.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Yeah. And it keeps you busy, because I know
they're all looking at you, and you think, I got to give them something.
Well, that's a good point. I got to move these people. So
yes.
What message are they hungering for today?
And I joke about it, but I take that very seriously. I mean, I'm lucky that basically I want to live a life of adventure, and unfortunately I'm not independently wealthy, so I just can't go and do that alone. And I sort of stumbled into speaking 20 years ago now. My gosh. Because nobody else on the team.
You're very good at it.
Well, thank you. I totally appreciate that. And it started by chance. Someone on the team had to go and give a talk. Nobody else wanted to do it, so they sent the young kid. And I fell into something that has enriched my life in ways I can't even explain. To be able to take my experiences on the side of a mountain and convey them at a conference to a gathering of people and have it be meaningful breathes tremendous life into what that experience is. And I take it very seriously about trying to bring some value. This is my little secret. I walk up there in the back of my mind after I've done my preparation thinking, my goal, my summit, is that the people will walk out of this room today thinking that was the best talk they've ever seen. That's what I'm shooting for all the time. And in that, I have uncovered a real identification with this notion of Everest, the brand that it is, what it symbolizes, what it stands for in terms of teamwork with our Sherpas, in terms of overcoming obstacles that we don't control, like avalanches and crevasses and wind and cold and fear and anxiety and doubt and all the things that just cripple us emotionally, and talk about those things and how ultimately we got through it and how we triumphed. And today, I find that message is more relevant than it's ever been. And I'm so blessed to be flying all over the world. I leave here, go to London, England to give a talk. And regardless of where you are on the continent, and I've spoken on them all except for Antarctica, don't think the Penguins were interested in my shtick. People are thirsty for that story of triumph through obstacle. And
that hasn't changed.
It's increased. I think before, when we had a different economic situation, there was more of a celebration of success that was coming seemingly easy. I don't think we realized it at the time, but now in retrospect, that success came pretty easily. Now that's not the case. It's a little bit harder work. There are more obstacles, more things beyond our control. So there's a greater appreciation for the successes when they come. And so I think it's even increased this sense of, show us how to triumph through adversity. And it's like the audience is sitting there going, come on, man. You've got my hour, right? Don't waste it. Give me something great. And that's what I'm thinking. I cannot waste this chance.
And is there a sense when you leave a group that you've made a difference, that somehow there will be a shift?
I hope so.
In how they approach things?
I would want to be arrogant to really think, oh wow, aren't they great to have seen me speak? Not. It's an art, to really a great speaker is artful in what they're saying and how they're saying it. And that's my hope. My hope is that when they go away from a talk, maybe it's the next day, maybe it's the next week, if I'm lucky, maybe it's in a month from now, and I've met people who say, I saw you 9 years ago speak, and you told the story about this and this, and that I told my kids, and oh, I've never forgotten that. That's like, whew. That's, for me, I'm hoping that impact is meaningful. That when they're out there in their life, they're going to see these challenges and be reminded of crevasses and obstacles, and how do I get to my summit? How do I climb my Everest?
If you could suggest to planners how to better work with speakers, are there any tips you could do? Is there anything that...
I think, it's my job to work better with you. I'm a big believer in conference calls pre to any event.
Right.
It's always a pain in the butt, I think, because they're busy, everyone's busy. But to get on the phone and talk, what's this event? What's it about? So help make that happen, only half an hour. From a speaker's perspective, I rarely ever get asked that question. It's more about, what am I going to do for you? I'm pretty easy. I'll sleep in the ditch. You can throw me a tent in the backyard.
Well, you've slept in the snow, so
we'll get you a car. I don't sweat it. I'll take a cab. It's no big deal. So I guess information for me, and I don't want to speak for other speakers, but for me, it's information, understanding who the group is, the leadership, whose meeting this is. Like, just let me be inside for a bit, and let me have access to the people who are having this meeting and whose philosophy and ideas are being injected into the content. I could take that and put it into my story, grab stories about Everest to wrap around it and deliver it. So really, I would just say, take the time to chat with me for 30 minutes and I can learn stuff.
Right.
And then let me sit in the general session. Sometimes it's boring, I'll tell you. Whew. Sit in there 4 hours thinking, what are they talking about? You're like, stabbing your eyes. But to sit there and to listen to all the other speakers inside the company out for the 4 hours before you speak that evening is invaluable, because always you're going to pick a little thing here, a little thing there, and then later that day, as John said, or as Michelle was talking about, and then it makes them interesting for me. Makes it, I can deliver something of meaning, not just a blah, 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 blah. Here we were, there we go, okay, thanks for having me, see you later.
So you're really personalizing it.
I don't oversell it. I'm not trying to tell you I'm just doing this fantastic job. You probably watch it and go, what? It doesn't even customize it at all. But in the back of my mind, I'm telling each story for a reason. I want to customize it.
What's the Everest you haven't conquered yet? Is there a...
Well, I should, tell you that I know this sounds, a bit tree huggy and, granola eater, Birkenstock wearing, but I don't think...
You're Canadian, that's
yes,
okay.
I'll explain it. I don't think you actually conquer any mountain. I thought that as a younger man, more testosterone and arrogance than maybe blood in my system. But I got beat up quite a few times and realized you don't conquer it. As Hillary, who first climbed Everest in '53, he said wonderfully in a book that Everest is never conquered. Occasionally, it may tolerate a momentary success. So I've always learned to appreciate that quote. For me, I've got 2 young kids, and I realize that mountaineering is a tough path to go and be a good dad and husband. You can get killed, and you're away a lot. So I'm now sort of in the twilight of my big expeditioning career, so I can be home for my kids. They're growing up fast. So that for me is the primary focus. I've been a pretty selfish guy for a lot of years, pursuing my own dreams. And now I'm more in the mode of continuing adventuring, running that store you talked about, inspiring people to be active and get out of doors and to contemplate what their Everest is. And that gives me a lot of value. And my 90-year-old grandfather, who had his birthday last week, he challenged me years ago to be of service, to stop being such a self-involved little jerk. And he said, be of service. And so I want to honor his challenge.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think you've experienced something that 99.999% of people never will. And what you have to then get people to do is use their imagination. And in a world that's driven by social media and technology, imagination is kind of a lost art. And I think those messages resonate with organizations.
I wonder if it's imagination or if it's more the storytelling.
Yeah, storytelling.
I think the imagination would still exist, but we're getting the storytelling being shoved into 140 characters.
Right.
And it forces you to be economical, that's for sure. But there's certain value in being able to, I guess that's why I think coming to a conference is great. I mean, there can be lots of wasted time if the plan isn't done properly. but to be able to just sit in a room together and feel what goes on. I love live performance of anything, dancing, sport. You could paint, you could sculpt. I love to witness, humans creating in the moment. Yeah. And that's what a conference allows. It allows for that. We're going to breathe the same air. We're going to have the same feeling. And I love that. But I'm also a big believer in having the chance to dive into the internet and view this conversation that you and I are having. Otherwise, not being able to be here, I can jump in and take a peek. I think
there's live or virtual. Let's
share the content.
They work together.
Yeah,
they work together. Well,
100%.
On behalf of people like me who will never get that much above sea level, I appreciate your time. It's great meeting you, and thank you for coming to the Inspiration Cafe.
Hey, Bill,
Jamie,
it's been a pleasure, buddy. Thank you.
Enjoy.